Director Val made her observation on my second Tuesday with her. She said it in front of 11 faculty members, a facilities review panel, and one junior aide who had the decency to look at the floor. She said she found it curious, her word, curious, that a biological human of advanced years, unaugmented, with no neural archive and no memory implant, was still holding a custodial post at an institution of the Veteran Institute standing. She said it pleasantly. That was the part I noticed, pleasantness of it. I told her I'd been here 22 years, that I found the work agreeable, and that my logbooks were current through yesterday's close of station. She glanced at the shelf behind me. 44 bound volumes, handwritten, one per 6 months, and smiled the way you smile at a child's drawing taped to a wall. Then she moved on to inspect the filtration manifolds. I went back to my logbooks. Val had come in from the Veteran Central Oversight Committee with a mandate: modernize the Institute, consolidate its data architecture, and document the efficiency gains for the committee's quarterly review. She was not unkind. She was, as best I could read her species social register, genuinely baffled. The veteran augment their memory at age 12. By the time they hold a directorship, they carry 4 decades of perfect recall in a subdermal node the size of a thumbnail. The idea of a person trusting biological memory, or worse, paper, struck her the way it strikes most of them. Like watching someone navigate by the stars when satellites exist, quaint, mildly embarrassing. The kind of thing you note in your report under legacy inefficiencies and move past. The faculty had found it amusing since my first year. The jokes were gentle but consistent. Professor Ekon, who held the chair in theoretical materials, once spent a full lunch explaining to a table of graduate students why human long-term recall degraded faster than veteran short-term buffer. He used charts. He was not wrong about the biology. He was also the one who, 4 years later, not locate his own equipment certification because he'd trusted it to a node that wasn't backed up to the Institute archive. I found the original form in volume 19, page 43rd entry from the top. He thanked me briefly and did not mention the charts. What Val did not know, and what I did not explain during her review, was that the Institute's digital archive had been running on a patchwork of legacy nodes since the original system architect retired 9 years ago. I knew this because I was the one who had filed the maintenance requests. I knew how many had been marked low priority. I knew which ones had logged handshake errors for years without anyone escalating the flag. I had written it all down, because that is what I do with things I notice. The system's migration was scheduled for the 3rd week of Val's tenure. Technical team brought in a consolidated archive unit. State-of-the-art, they said. The same model used by the Veteran Senate chambers. I watched them run cable bundles past my supply room door for 2 days. The lead technician stopped once to look at my shelf of logbooks. She didn't say anything, but her expression did. It was a cousin of Val's expression. The polite version of, "Why are you still here?" I moved my logbooks from the open shelf to the dry cabinet on the interior wall, the one away from the conduit runs. Old habit, temperature variance, mostly. I didn't like the smell of new cabling anywhere near paper, and I had worked long enough in stations to know that new equipment, in its first week, has opinions about the rooms it lives in. The migration started on a 6th day. I know the exact time because I wrote it down. 3-4 station hours, the moment the transfer initiated. I was awake because I'm usually awake at that hour. I made tea. I heard the hum in the walls change pitch, which it does when the main processing load shifts. Then I heard it change back. Then I heard it change back twice more, in quick succession, which is not what it does. By 0600, corridor outside my supply room had 4 technicians in it, speaking quickly in Vethrani I mostly followed. By 0800 there were 8. By noon, Val herself was in the corridor with her operations lead, and neither of them was speaking at all. That is, in my experience, worse than 8 technicians talking fast. The Cascade wipe had taken the primary archive. 40 years of institute records, research logs, faculty appointments, equipment provenance, maintenance histories, safety certifications, ethics reviews, external audit trails, accreditations, correspondence going back to the founding charter. Gone. The recovery team spent the rest of that day, and most of the next, on backup nodes, then reported what I had suspected they would report. The backups had been running a corrupted verification handshake for 3 years. The handshake errors had been logged. They had been marked low priority. The backups were unrecoverable. The Institute's external accreditation body sent a notice of provisional hold on all research activity within 6 hours of the news. By the second morning, the faculty common room had the specific quality of silence that means people are calculating how much of their own work they can no longer prove they did. Professor Ekhan sat at the table with an empty cup and did not reach for the carafe. I walked past, said nothing, kept walking. Val came to my supply room that evening. She is a tall species, the veteran. She had to angle her head down to meet my eye level, which I had noticed she did not usually bother to do. She stood in my doorway a moment before she spoke. She asked if she could sit down, gave her the chair I use for reading and took the stool. She said, she understood I kept manual records of station operations. I said I did. She asked how far back they went. I told her 22 years, continuous, cross-references to the prior custodian's volumes for the 7 years before my arrival. Custodian Helm had kept good books. I had digitized them when I arrived and filed the digital copies with the main archive, which was now gone, but I had also kept the originals in the dry cabinet, which was a practice Helm herself had recommended, and which I had seen no reason to abandon. Val was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if she could see them. We worked for 6 days, Val and I, and a transcription aide she sent for on the second morning. I read from the logbooks. The aide entered the data into the Institute's emergency recovery framework. Val cross-checked against the faculty's personal nodes, which held fragments. Individual researchers' own records, incomplete, gaps everywhere, but enough to triangulate against mine. My volumes held the backbone: dates, asset numbers, certification cycles, inspection results, chain of custody for every piece of equipment that had passed through the Institute's labs in 2 decades. On the third day, Ikan appeared in the doorway and asked, without any particular expression, if I had the certification history for the Lab 7 spectrometry array. I found it in volume 26. He copied it out by hand, which I thought was a reasonable choice given the circumstances, and left without the charts. On the 4th day, the committee liaison arrived to assess the damage. He stood in my supply room, looked at the stacks of open logbooks, looked at Val reading aloud from volume 31, and did not say anything for a long time. On the 6th day, the Institute's provisional archive was certified intact enough to satisfy the external audit requirement. The accreditation hold was lifted. Faculty resumed research access. The lead technician from the migration team walked past my door twice without stopping. I did not make anything of it. Val sat in my reading chair for a few minutes after the aide packed up and left, looking at the dry cabinet. She asked me why I still wrote things by hand. I told her that my first station chief, 40 years ago, had said that a system you depend on is a system you have to maintain, and that the cheapest system to maintain is the one that runs on patience and a decent pen. I told her the chief had not been an especially philosophical person. It was just something she said before every shift, the way some people say good morning. Val looked at the cabinet a while longer. She said she would be filing her efficiency report with the committee the following week, and that she intended to include one amendment to her original staffing recommendations. I said that was her call. She said she was aware of that. She left. I made a logbook entry for the day, the time, the summary, the outcome, the count of records recovered. I noted the chair had been borrowed and returned. I noted the atmospheric processor reading, which was nominal. I noted that Professor Ekhan had borrowed a pen and not returned it, which was not the first time and would not be the last. The kettle on, and went back to work.